Okay, Portia, so to show you how to factor this, I don't know if you remember last year in class, but one of the ways that I showed you was to make the letter X. And then we were going to fill some things in the X. At the top sort of triangle shape of the X, we would put, like if we think of this as being 1x squared minus 4x minus 5, A is 1, B is negative 4. Let me fix that. B is negative 4 and C is negative 5. And so we would do A times C. So if I do 1 times negative 5, I'd put a negative 5 in the top. And then the bottom would be just B. And in this case, B is negative 4. And then on either side, we need numbers that when we multiply, we get negative 5. But if we were to add them, we'd get negative 4. But if we're going to multiply and get a negative, we have to have one positive and one negative. And the only way to multiply and get 5, of course, is to use 5 and 1 because 5's prime. Now, if I want that to come out negative, either the 5 has to be negative or the 1 has to be negative. Now, remember, I wanted to add to negative 4, so that tells me that the 5 has to have the negative and the 1 will stay positive. And now I want to know how to put that into my parentheses to indicate what my factors are. Well, you go back to your A value, and A is in front of the x squared term. So what you're going to do is you're going to put AX, not x squared, but just AX underneath. And in this case, since A is 1, I'm just going to put X. Now, if A was 2, I would put a 2X. If A was 3, I'd put a 3X and so forth. And then I'm going to look to see if I can reduce. But since it's a 1 on the bottom, I'm not going to be able to reduce it at all. So that tells me if I look at the left side, the factor I'm going to fill in there is going to be X minus 5. And then I'll use a different color. If I go over to the other side, I have 1 over X. So that tells me I'm going to have X plus 1 because the 1 was positive. And then if I wanted to know what the zeros were, then of course from there I'd set each factor equal to 0. So I'd say X minus 5 equals 0 and X plus 1 equals 0. And so that would mean that X would either equal 5, and that would give me a value of 0, or X would equal negative 1 to get a value of 0. And then those values, if they were showing up, if this expression was in the denominator of your fraction, then these are the values you have to eliminate. So you would say that your domain, I'll just use a D for domain, would be all reals. And I think they say all real numbers. I'm just going to say all reals except, and I think you know now what the exceptions are going to be, except 5 and negative 1, because those would cause division by 0 if this was in a fraction. And I'm going to give you just one more example, Portia, where the leading coefficient, meaning the A value, isn't a 1, just so you can see what that looks like. So if I was going to factor this expression, again, I would still make my X, and I'm still going to put A times C at the top. So 3 times negative 8 would be negative 24. And in the bottom, I'm going to put just B, which is negative 2. And then on the sides, I need numbers that if I multiplied, I would get negative 24. So one has to be positive and one has to be negative. But I want them to add to negative 2, so they have to differ by 2. And I bet you would figure out that that would have to be 6 and 4, and the signs have to be opposite. And since I wanted to add to a negative 2, the 6 has to be the negative. And now I'm going to put those numbers over. If you recall, we're going to put those over A times X. So that's going to be 3X on each of those, underneath each of those numbers, I should say. And then I'm going to see if I can reduce. Well, on the left side, I actually can reduce negative 6 over 3x. I can reduce that to negative 2 over x because 3 goes into 6 2 times. Now on the other side, that 4 over 3, that doesn't reduce. So the factors that I'm going to put in my parentheses Well, on the left side, I'm going to have the factor. That's going to generate the factor x minus 2. And then on the right side, pick a different color, that is going to generate the factor 3x plus 4. And if you wanted to check to make sure that that was actually going to work, I'll come over here, we could multiply that back. We could take x minus 2 times 3x plus 4 and just FOIL that back to make sure we're getting what we started with. Well, x times 3x would be 3x squared, and x times 4 would be plus 4x, and then negative 6 times 3, or excuse me, negative 2 times 3x would be negative 6x, and then negative 2 times 8 would be minus 8, and then if I combine those two middle terms that are alike, I get 3x squared, I get minus 2x, and then bring down my minus 8. So I can see that I'm getting back what I started with, so I know that I factored it correctly. And then just to complete this, if I set each of those equal to 0, if I set x minus 2 equal to 0, I would get x equals 2. And if I set 3x plus 4 equal to 0, I would get x equals negative 4/3. And those would be the two values I would have to restrict from my domain. So I hope this helps. Let me know if you need more videos.